What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to the Smark Out Moment Smack Talk podcast. We're here with episode 6 of the Paul Heyman SmackDown podcast. Here comes the pain. And joining me, Callum Wiggins, on this journey back in time is Robert DeFelice.
Here comes the pain indeed. We're on the road to, I guess it's not called the biggest party of the summer yet, but we're on the road to SummerSlam. And it's one of the best SummerSlams of all time. And to get there, we got some pretty good SmackDown episodes.
Absolutely. So, as you all know, when we go through this journey back in time, we're revisiting the period where Paul Heyman was writing for SmackDown. So we're now here on the August 1st, 2002 edition of SmackDown. But first of all, I just want to remind everyone to make sure you've clicked the bell for notifications, you're liking the video, you're leaving a comment below, telling us what you think of this episode of SmackDown and what you think about the podcast. If you haven't seen this episode yet, there's a link down in the description if you want to check it out as well. All the matches are listed there, so you know what you get to expect. But we're going to write it down for you anyway, so you won't need to worry about that too much. But as always, before we get down into the nitty-gritty of what happened on that episode of SmackDown, we've got some news and admin to clear away. So, the news itself, there isn't really a huge amount of WWE-related stuff. I mean, there's a couple of big things, but nothing super major. The first small thing was that Chris Jericho signed a contract extension, which would extend all the way into 2005, when he left for the first time.
All right, so yeah, I was gonna say that's his last contract of his first WWE run.
Josh Matthews was signed to WWE, but in order to work in production initially, before transitioning into an announcer role, he was not signed as a wrestler. That was never their intention once they did sign him eventually.
I would say that's unfortunate, but I think he's made a pretty great career out of the production side of things.
The big news story from the WWE side of things, at the very least, is the incarnation of WWE Films, now known as WWE Studios.
Wow.
So that was announced on the July 31st as a attempt by WWE to expand into non-wrestling related programming and in order to try and secure big roles for WWE talent by producing their own movies.
They don't get the ball rolling with that for how long?
I think that the first movie, and I might be completely wrong with this because I haven't really delved into history too much. No, it's not the Marine. I believe one of the Rock's first movies. I think is it Walk Tall? Is it WWE Studios movie?
Really?
Yeah, I believe that's a WWE Studios movie. I might be completely wrong. You might have to just verify that for me, but bury me if I'm wrong with that regard. But I think that was one of the first WWE Studios movies. I know that they had things like The Marine. They had The Condemned as well with Steve Austin in it.
So interesting. The Scorpion King.
The Scorpion King is a WWE Studios movie. I forgot about that.
As WWF Entertainment.
Right.
Then it's The Rundown, which might have been the one you were thinking of. Yeah, and then, yes, Walking Tall is a movie. So The Rock's first 3 films were all WWE Studios. Didn't know that. And then we get into the See No Evil era and The Marine and all that.
So it's kind of WWE's own fault that Rock got so big.
Yeah.
If they hadn't put him in so many movies early on, then maybe he wouldn't have left so quickly.
Maybe they felt like, hey, we can do these movies and it can give us the appearance of we're big time, but we'll always keep our stars.
I think it's quite interesting that considering so many failed projects that WWE ventured into during the Attitude Era, which they had to pretty much abandon due to the fact that wrestling became less popular and the revenue dried up, things like The World, stuff like that WWE theme. It was a theme park or some sort of adventure park idea they had for a little while. Just stuff to that effect had to eventually be cut away, but WWE Films is still going strong, or W Studios now, should I say, is still going strong 18 years later.
It depends on what you mean by strong, but they are still going.
I probably was over-egging them a little bit there by saying that, but it is still a thing. At the very least, it is still a thing.
And they do fine for what they do.
The other interesting story that I found during my research, which is a bit just out of place, but it is a insane and pretty tragic story from the independent scene at the time, where there's a wrestler called Messiah, whose real name was William Welsh, was working for a company known as Epic, and during a home invasion attempt, he had one of his thumbs cut off with a pair of garden shears.
Oh my god.
And then the attackers tried to remove his other thumb at the same time and his penis with the garden shears. before his roommate called the cops and they ran him away. So
now,
yeah.
So now I don't know much about this guy. But,
no, I don't know either. Nothing beyond
that,
this. This is the first time I'd heard his name come up was when I was just researching the newsletter, and it just leaked out in the page in front of me. I have to say
that sounds more personal than like it was just some random home invasion.
Yeah, I imagine so. Like I couldn't really see too much I couldn't read too much into the actual story behind it, but it does seem a little bit more to. If you do just like any random, not to say that we do it anyway, but like I'm sure most people that just do some sort of random home invasion just for a burglary or anything along those lines, you wouldn't exactly go in with garden shears and have a deliberate attack on particular body parts.
Yeah, 2 thumbs and a penis really seems deliberate.
2 thumbs and a penis sounds like my rock band.
It's a great rock band.
Yeah, the dick's at front, obviously.
They rock hard.
Okay, that's don't talk like
See,
that.
it's the 2002 humor coming out of us.
I also wanted to bring up this because I wanted to see this was a big section of the newsletter that I wanted to bring out because I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. It's not really a news item, but I thought it's quite interesting to see what the perspective was at the time, especially with regards to like the audience and what they wanted to see. So Meltzer writes in the newsletter, the segment on SmackDown where Stephanie yelled at Keebler and tied her into the Bischoff scenario while Keebler made that smirk after she left seemed to be the beginning of the Bischoff backup plan. So the idea, which I think this is maybe more Meltzer speculating than anything else, was that he thought that if Bischoff didn't work out, then Stacey would be the person who would take over as the GM of Raw afterwards, which I think is a bit of a stretch, but still.
They probably went to Stacey because the thought of doing 2 powerful women in the GM role sounded attractive to them.
Yeah. So he continues saying, there are discussed scenarios along the lines of Keebler getting together with Bischoff against Stephanie for now. That could lead to, if need be, screwing with Eric to get the power and establishing herself as a first-rate manipulative game player. Meltzer says this is a big mistake in direction. Stephanie is a big mistake on her own, and this is not even based on her performance of late. Wrestling fans, predominantly males 15 to 30 these days, which, do you know what the median age of the latest episode of Raw was?
I imagine like 45 to 56.
57.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's even worse than that. The median age for NXT is 58.
Wow. That
so
doesn't
basically everyone that's watching this point in
all.
time is the people that are still watching today.
Yeah, legit. So to me, it seems like we just haven't grown at all.
No, not significantly anyway. Obviously, you do see kids in the audience and new fans and stuff like that, but it's just, it's so hard to tell, really. I mean, obviously, people watching it through different means, so I don't read the 58 as it's only those people watching it, because people that are like teenagers and kids, they're probably finding different ways of streaming those shows, watching the clips on YouTube or following Twitter instead, rather than actually just sitting down and watching the show for 2 hours at a time.
Yeah, that's a shame, man.
But anyway, he continues, wrestling fans, predominantly males 15 to 30 these days, want the wrestlers to be fantasy characters who kick ass and don't listen to authority. The idea that they are subservient pawns for women in their early 20s may make for cool storylines for the women's audience that hates men, but is exactly what the guys don't want to see. Now, this is Meltzer in 2002, and I don't think he's inaccurate in what he's saying at that point in time. But it's just, that's
the thing is, he's not, but that reads very scathingly. You know what I mean? Like,
well, I don't want this to be like something that's like launches an attack on Meltzer, or Meltzer said this, go attack him, say that he was sexist or anything along those lines. He was reporting at that time the perspective that I think a lot of people probably would have felt.
Yeah, the statistics at that time.
Mm.
But I think
it doesn't age well.
Yeah, it doesn't age well. Great way to put it. And to say that you would only put Stacey and Stephanie in that role to satiate maybe a female audience that might just be all for feminism and anti-man, I don't think that would have been the mindset in 2002. Honestly, they probably had this like sleazy idea of, oh, but a woman in power is hot. You know what I mean? Like,
essentially they do that. Like, as we kind of carry on with the story, they sexualize Stephanie McMahon's character quite significantly during this run as general manager. So she's always coming out in reasonably low-cut tops or short dresses and stuff like that. So they know why people would be tuning in to see all the women in any circumstance at this point in time. And obviously, again, we're very happy and thankful for the fact that it has moved on. Yeah.
It is 2002. That is the culture, and I think it's even more intriguing to take a step back and look at that time because of how far we've moved, even since we've started this podcast.
So those are like the big headlines or stories or talking points outside of these shows, but now we move on to the actual ratings war that's going on. So Raw this week for the July 29th edition got a 3.7 rating. SmackDown for the 1st of August, a 3.56. So Raw wins for the second week in a row. A lot closer than it was the previous week, but still a victory for the Red brand. I don't know how much we can really read into that side of things. Raw is still a bigger show at this point in time.
At this point in time, yes, and I would argue we haven't even stepped into the official splitting of the brands. Like, soon enough, by next month, we'll be talking about separate champions and a really separate brand. Like, Raw and SmackDown almost don't even touch after September.
So let's talk about what Raw was up to before we move on to the actual in-depth nitty-gritty stuff of SmackDown. So Raw, the big story, as we talked about last week, was Chris Jericho and the Un-Americans jumped ship from from SmackDown to Raw. So Raw now has the World Tag Team Champions and Chris Jericho. So Chris Jericho's involvement was in the main event segment where The Rock fought Ric Flair in the main event. So Rock, again, going around the houses fighting the big deals, the big stars, the big legends.
And even, I think Rock at this point is just trying to have some good wrestling matches on the way out. Because if you look at who he's been in the ring with, Eddie Guerrero, he'll be in the ring with Chris Benoit and Edge on this show. He'll be teaming with Edge, but Ric Flair, Lance Storm, Christian. I think he's just trying to wrestle on his way out.
So Chris Jericho would attack Ric Flair off the bell, so he's still a heel, and his feud with Ric Flair would lead into a match at SummerSlam, which we will be reviewing on the Patreon Darkcast. So make sure you're tuned in on that tier, the $10 tier, and you'll be able to listen, follow us along, follow the journey in its entirety as we do the pay-per-view show reviews as well. So other stories that happen, the Island Boys. This is the show they actually made the attack on Mae Young and Fabulous Moolah. I got confused with the previous week's one where they appeared on the last show, but they didn't really do much of note. Whereas this one was where they attacked Mae Young and Fabulous Moolah. So they are getting into the women beating segments quite quickly on Raw.
Well, listen, if you didn't hear what I said on the last podcast, I'll say it again. Nothing better to do with 300-pound Samoan men than to beat up elderly women.
Chris Benoit became the Intercontinental Champion by defeating Rob Van Dam. And that would be a big talking point as we go on to later on in the show.
And I would argue maybe there's nobody who personifies what the Intercontinental Championship should be than a 2002 Chris Benoit.
And the other big story is the fallout from the Triple H heel turn on Shawn Michaels last week. So during this show, Shawn Michaels is thrown through a car window. And he's shown bleeding and he's taken out on a stretcher following that segment. And Triple H essentially spends essentially throughout the night, Michaels is in contentious situations with multiple superstars, including Test, Booker T, and The Big Show. And the idea that they leave you with at the end of it is that Triple H isn't the one who did the attack. And so it's a big whodunit, who was the one that assaulted Shawn Michaels.
And it's interesting that they, and I don't know how much we're going to talk about Raw, but they really did have Triple H turn on Shawn only to feign concern for Shawn, only to reconfirm that, I beat the shit out of you in a parking lot.
Well, yeah, it's very Triple H Stone Cold Steve Austin from the big running over spot. The idea that, it was Rikishi that ran you over. Yeah, but I was the one that told Rikishi to run you over. That sort of it all always just leads back to Triple H.
I do like that Shawn Michaels gives the great line of, "Yeah, I know you're mad at me," to the Un-Americans. "I know you're mad at me because you're still not over that I beat Bret Hart at Survivor Series."
I like to think they always just like to rub that in.
And at this point,
it doesn't matter that Bret Hart just suffered a stroke a couple of weeks back. They're still just like mocking him constantly on TV.
At this point, it's 2002 though, and that hasn't even been touched upon really. Like, now it's been beaten into the ground, but at that point, it was rarely talked about, if ever.
So let's move on now, so that's the end of the Raw portion where we discuss it, because we want to talk about SmackDown. This is the Blue Show. This is the show that we review. So August 1st, 2002, recorded July 30th from the Charlotte Coliseum in Charlotte, North Carolina.
All right, we're branching out. We did a lot in the Northeast early on, and now we're branching out.
So again, for the second week in a row, we're still kicking it off straight away with some action. So it's Rey Mysterio against Tajiri.
Great match.
Oh, absolutely. The match between Mysterio and Chavo was good. I think this match is even better. I would go so far to say that this match would not look out of place in a 2020 show.
I would agree.
I thought that they were both excellent in terms of Mysterio hitting a Asai moonsault onto the floor onto Tajiri almost immediately. Tajiri catches a boot from Mysterio, flips him over, Mysterio lands on his feet, and Tajiri then kicks his head off, like this really cool looking sequence. Tajiri at one point does this absolutely bizarre looking surfboard stretch, which I thought was unique at the very least. There was just so many moves and transitions. Mysterio escaping a powerbomb and turning that into a tornado DDT. You eventually get
Tajiri then hitting a powerbomb, which was gnarly. Like, what a drop on that powerbomb by Tajiri.
Yeah, lands Mysterio really hard. Mysterio hits the 619, and then he tries to go for the West Coast Pop, but he does a sunset flip instead. Tajiri counters that into a pin of his own for like a long 2 count. Then Mysterio does eventually get onto the very top rope, then hits a West Coast Pop from the top rope onto Tajiri to get the pin. So they mixed it up a little bit with the 619 not immediately leading into the finish, but they're still getting that move over, and they're getting the West Coast Pop over as like his big finishing move. You know what I really liked about this match? Beyond just how good it was in every aspect?
That they kept trying to actually win?
Oh no, that was obviously a good aspect to it as well, but the best part of it was a match that had a finish, and then nothing else happened.
Yeah.
Because I've gotten too used to the fact that basically the bell rings in any match at the end of SmackDown, and then there's a run-in, or there's the guy who lost beats up the guy that won, or there's something else that happens immediately. Nope, this was just one guy beating another guy, and then he celebrates, and then we move on.
To quote Drew, it's a match.
Yeah, it's a match, but it's a good match. And so I'm happy with that one. Kurt Angle's walking backstage. I love that this is a trope throughout the Attitude Era and into the early Ruthless Aggression era. It's just guys walking backstage, and that's classed as a segment.
Yeah, because you have to show that, hey, look, they're in the building, in case you were worried.
So Angle enters the ring for a promo. He basically tries to clarify what happened last week about him calling Eric and not wanting to leave SmackDown, and he's not going to Raw, but he wants to call out Brock Lesnar. Says that Brock Lesnar's actions compelled him to leave the arena. Says that he was winning NCAA championships while Lesnar was playing Hungry Hungry Hippos.
No, like that.
Which, I don't know, that just makes Angle feel old a little bit.
Yeah, and I don't think the age discrepancy is that big between the two. But
no, I don't even know. I think they're pretty similar, actually. I think there's only like a 5-year age gap at most.
But I think it's pretty funny that they would use that line. And that, let's talk about this real quick. Because Angle's been there for a few years already, they're treating him like an established old guard of a name.
Mm.
Whereas, like, now, AJ Styles is like 43, 44. Yeah, it's insane, the difference in the view of age.
Well, it's more than that. It's like the idea that Angle's only been there he debuted in late 99, so realistically he's only been there for about 2.5 years at this point. He's already ascended to the main event status. He already feels like a household name. He's part of the main event furniture in the company. And you look at people nowadays like like, how long has somebody like... I'm trying to think of just a good example to compare a bit. How long has Chad Gable been on the main roster in WWE?
Chad Gable's been on the main roster for 4 years.
Yeah, he's in there twice as long as Angle was at this point. And he's somebody you can really compare to Angle in a lot of ways, and he's just nowhere.
If they started pushing him today, they would push him as a fresh, hot, young superstar. You know?
Yeah, exactly. He'd still be, at this point in time, he'd still be finding his way through the mid-card. Maybe he would have had a United States title run or something like that at this point in time. But no, they saw what they had with Angle and they pushed him immediately. And I'm not saying that every wrestler is going to be Kurt Angle, because very few wrestlers are Kurt Angle. But sometimes you just need to push someone quickly.
Yeah, I think this era of guys could have benefited from the skyrocket pushes that the John Cena, Brock Lesnar guys were getting.
So Hulk Hogan arrived when Angle calls out Lesnar, so he comes out instead. Basically says that Angle's whining and that he has beef with Lesnar from being attacked in the tag title match last week. So if anyone's fighting Lesnar tonight, it's going to be Hogan. Angle says, what's Hogan going to do? Battle Lesnar at shuffleboard? Again, because at least Hogan is old at this point in time. So they get face-to-face in the ring. Stephanie comes out and says that she loves competition, and the most competitive wrestlers are found on SmackDown. She announces that Hogan vs. Angle will be tonight, and then the winner of that match will face Lesnar next week. So it's cool, a situation where makes Lesnar feel like a big deal, because these two established big WWE stars want a piece of him. And it's like just leads on to next week. Like, it makes you excited for a match this week has consequences for the next week.
What a fucking novel concept, huh, Callum?
So Angle says that he's going to make Hogan tap out again and make it quick because he feels sorry for Hogan. Hogan responds to that in typical way by punching Angle.
Hang on, bud. I gotta butt in here and really say this. You know how old Hulk Hogan was?
I'm assuming that Hogan at this point in time was probably about 48.
49 years old.
So he's younger than Undertaker is now.
Yeah, and he's not that far away from AJ fucking Styles right now. Jericho.
Yeah, now, Jericho's older than... Well, he's about the same age as what Hogan was, yeah.
To me, at this point in my life, Hulk Hogan was like 60, you know? Because perception was that he was this decrepit old man. Amazing.
I think with Hogan, the issue is the fact that he went bald early. So that hurt his appeal a little, or that hurt like the age difference thing quite a bit. I mean, you see the fact that because his body has been worn down, because he used to be so big, and now he's not as big. That's an issue. The fact that he probably did a lot in the 80s and stuff like that we don't even know about, and so that's probably coming to roost a little bit as well.
I just think that that's so wild to me.
And the fact that he's got like a terrible back because he kept performing the leg drop for so long. So his back is completely fucked by this point. So it kind of all adds up to making Hogan probably older than he might have been if he'd had a bit more of a kind life, should we say.
Like, it's people today want Sting versus The Undertaker. They thirst for this match. But, like, in 2002, Hulk Hogan was seen as a relic. I just think that that's funny, but carry on.
So Stephanie enters her office backstage, and Eric Bischoff is there sprawling on the couch, so this still can't die, these segments. Bischoff says there's no reason they can't be friends, and Stephanie says that couldn't happen because she doesn't like him that much. Bischoff notes that she's boring him because while she got Lesnar, he got Triple H, Chris Jericho, and the Un-Americans, so that's a 5-1 advantage. Stephanie screams at security to escort him out of the building, and as Bischoff is being led away by security, he asks Stephanie what the main event is tonight, and she says it's Rock and Edge. And so Bischoff smiles, says, oh, that sounds pretty good, and then they just move on. So we get excited for the fact that it seems like it's going to be Rock versus Edge, but that isn't actually how things turn out, as we'll figure out when we actually get to the main event.
Would have been a good match, though.
Yeah, it's one of those matches that I don't think ever happened, really. I think it probably happened in like an Attitude Era thing where Edge was on his way up, and he was a member of
Right, it probably happened as like Rock is just, smacking Edge around because Edge is the like tag team guy at this point.
Yeah. So we move on to the first match of Brock Lesnar's time on SmackDown, which he's taking on Mark Henry, who he assaulted with an F5 the previous week. So this match, it feels like it should feel like a big deal because Mark Henry's obviously been presented as the world's strongest man, and he's a big guy, and Lesnar's a big guy. But Henry hasn't won a match since we've been watching these episodes. So why is Henry a big deal?
Because he's big.
He's a big deal because you're meant to feel like he's a big deal because he is big and he's won these competitions. But in terms of his actual booking, he's just a jobber.
Okay, but we see this every day now.
Yeah, that's true. It does make it good.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, watching this back, it doesn't feel as shocking because they really got used to that point of, okay, we're done pushing, Umaga, he's just a guy, or we're done pushing the Big Show, he's just a hardcore guy now.
So, in this match, Lesnar doesn't budge Henry with a shoulder tackle, so Henry teases him to go try it again, and as soon as Lesnar turns, he decks Henry with a clothesline. I thought that was such a cool spot. Just so simple, but it's so effective. Henry blocks Lesnar's suplex attempts and nails a delayed suplex of his own. So good job Goldberg wasn't around at this point in time because he would have pinned Lesnar off the back of that.
Right.
Huge belly throw by Lesnar onto Henry. So good on Henry for taking that bump. And
Henry does bump around for Lesnar here.
Yeah, and then he hits the F5 and gets the victory. So
not as clean as the prior one.
No, it was a short match. Henry's not exactly much competition into the booking at this point, but it still is a cool visual to see Lesnar F5 somebody at £350. So Lesnar returns backstage after the victory, gets face to face with Hulk Hogan, telling him he wants Hogan to win so he can take on the Hulkster next week. He's still doing that big Sid facial expression thing, which is just so far removed from what Lesnar does now.
Yeah, it's funny. When he first showed up, I did get a lot of Sid vibes, and you're kind of reaffirming what I felt all those years ago.
So this is the start of a weird backstage continuum segment where essentially it just moves from one feud and interaction to another quite seamlessly. And I think this was another experiment by Heyman to try and interlock different stories in one continuous motion. What did you think about this whole thing? Because I'll go into in detail further, but like the fact that you see in the span of a couple of minutes, you see Lesnar, Hogan, Billy, Chuck, Rico, John Cena, Kurt Angle, all in this one continuous 3-minute long backstage segment.
Yeah. I admire that they maximize their minutes in this era. Like, I feel like you get a lot of people over that you don't do now with, extra hours on television. But some of it can be really jarring.
So Lesnar and Heyman continue walking, and they pass by an argument between Billy and Chuck, who are upset that the tag titles are moved to Raw, and they're wondering why they should even bother being a tag team anymore, because if the titles aren't on their brand, then what can they win? Rico tries to get him back on the same page, but they leave with Billy saying he's the one that's carrying the team. Cena approaches, laughing at Rico. Rico says that Cena's hair and outfits are terrible, and that the women screaming at him.
He wasn't wrong.
Yeah. And the women screaming at him every week must be doing it out of sheer horror. I don't think any women were screaming at Cena at this point in time, but I'm sure they want to make it pretend like that's the case.
I think Rico had some solid fashion advice there for John, and who knows if maybe some women were shrieking at John Cena, but maybe it was, in fact, in horror, or maybe it looked like they were screaming, but they were yawning out of boredom.
So Cena does a whole laugh, and then for a second, and then does the dead spot, like, haha, that sort of thing.
I hate John Cena in this era.
Cena asks Rico about his own style, saying it's a mixture of Liberace meets the Wolfman. Rico then tries to slap Cena, because basically every angle that Cena's involved with involves some sort of slap.
Ruthless aggression, baby.
Cena stops his arm, and then Cena goes to slap Rico, but then stops when Rico just flinches and just hides because he's a scaredy cat. So that sets up their match later in the night. Rico then bumps into Kurt Angle. Angle keeps walking until he sees Lesnar just standing around in the corridor, just waiting for his cue. And then Lesnar says that he hopes Angle wins tonight so they can fight next week.
Boy, Brock Lesnar, just a little shit disturber.
Yeah, I know.
And what good is Paul Heyman in this era? He's not talking for Brock. He's not, getting him limos. What is Paul Heyman even doing?
He's just his agent. He's essentially, at this point, he's being booked as a leech to Lesnar. Like, Lesnar's a big deal. He can kind of carry himself anyway. He's not really being the huge mouthpiece for it. He's basically just found this guy in OVW and decided that this guy's the next big thing, and he's decided to hitch his wagon to him. So I think that's kind of the angle they're going with, that Lesnar could probably be doing fine on his own, but Heyman managed to get in his head, and so he's using that to reassert his power after he was kicked out of WWE after Lawler came back to commentary. I think that's the angle they're going with. Anyway, speaking of angles, we've got Kurt Angle versus Hulk Hogan. And that is obviously a rematch from King of the Ring. Hogan is hugely over, as usual. This is something that's like a pet peeve to me. Hogan came in wearing a feather boa, and then before the match even kicked off, there's bits of feathers just all over the fucking ring.
I noticed that last week as well, though. The feather boas were just kind of coming apart all over the place, because in his entrance last week, they were flying all over the arena too.
Yeah, but it just felt so much more noticeable with this one because it's just a singles match between these two. And you look forward to these angle matches as well, and just because they're just landing constantly in feathers, it just seemed a little bit... Angle is in control before... Hogan starts off in control, does a hip toss to Angle. Angle takes the heat, manages to deliver a series of kicks and punches into the corner to wear down Hogan. Hogan blocks Angle suplex into one of his own. This is more like if Angle wrestled in the 1980s, this is kind of what he would do. That type of thing. He's having to
I still think they're pretty solid matches together, though, because they had a few.
I mean, it's hard to have a bad match with Kurt Angle, really.
That's true.
But it's a lot more constrained. Angle puts his feet on the ropes for leverage during a sleeper hold, so this is very, very old school 1980s stuff that you're seeing right here. You don't see that very often now, people putting their feet on the ropes for leverage during wrestling holds.
I wish that wrestling would kind of go back to being pro wrestling instead of just this agreed, it's a cosplay Mortal Kombat fight. I miss stupid things like putting your feet on the ropes for leverage and, as we've spoken about before, the arm dropping thing. It's just so simple. It's so good.
Angle blocks a big boot and uses that to pick the ankle of Hogan. Hogan fights out and then does hit the big boot. He goes for the leg drop. Angle gets up, stops him midway through, and nails an impressively held Angle slam, because I don't think Hogan was giving him much help in that department.
Yeah.
Manages to get him up for it. Hogan kicks out too. But he doesn't Hulk up, which I was surprised about.
Yeah, maybe it's because the Hulkster, maybe he wanted to give Kurt Angle a little something different. Maybe he was a little bored, because Hogan has been noted to get bored with his formulaic matches.
So Hogan gets the ropes, Angle pulls him away during the ankle lock. Surely that should be an actual break, but they sometimes play about with the rules a little bit with those ones where you get to the ropes, but if you pull him away, you can still keep him in the hold.
Right.
Hogan pushes Angle away, but into the referee. Ref takes a bump. Angle grabs a chair, charges. Hogan boots the chair into Angle's face, hits the leg drop, has the pin, but the referee's down. Lesnar charges the ring, but Hogan punches him off the apron. Angle then hits him with a chair to the back, but the referee spots him hitting the chair to the back, and so uses this to disqualify Angle. Hogan wins, so he gets the match with Lesnar next week. Angle is frustrated. He attacks Hogan post-match, but Hogan hulks up that time, and he boots Angle, throws him out of the ring. Lesnar uses this opportunity to grab Hogan from behind and hits the F5 again. So Lesnar's now F5'd Hogan twice.
Hogan's hip is taking a pounding. I'm guessing, spoiler alert, folks, sorry if you haven't seen it, but I'm guessing that's why he doesn't beat him with the F5 in the actual match itself.
You will be surprised. He may not beat him with the F5, but he does hit an F5 in the match that we'll talk about next week. But at the end of the day, this is a good match, very old school style match. It's about as old school match you'll ever see Kurt Angle really put on. And yeah, it means that next week we're going to see in the main event Hulk Hogan versus Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, and
I think we got Brock Lesnar we got Rock versus Hulk Hogan and Brock Lesnar versus Hulk Hogan. We never got Stone Cold and Hulk Hogan.
Isn't that amazing? That to me is the most shocking thing, that they never just forced the goddamn match down our throats. Like, that match should have happened.
So we move on to another all-action match, Rikishi versus the Reverend Devon. Reverend Devon, obviously our favourite character on these shows.
You know what? Rikishi and Reverend Devon both, along with Hardcore Porn, need to just stop. Like, why are you on all these shows?
So during this match, Batista trips up Rikishi, but Rikishi then sends Devon flying over the top rope onto Batista. Batista at one point grabs the leg of Rikishi, which allows Devon to nail a leg drop with his own. That's gimmick infringement, brother.
Yeah.
Devon then hits another one from the second rope. He's really pushing it with Hogan this week.
Well, I'm sure Hogan was okay.
And then what can only be described as one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in a wrestling ring, and imagine that ground that is covering. So Devon goes for a diving headbutt. Rikishi is in no position to receive a diving headbutt to the shoulder or anything like that. He is laying with his legs facing where Devon is diving from. Devon, essentially, he lifts his legs up, and Devon misses with the headbutt, lands in between Rikishi's legs, but not on his crotch. And so Rikishi used this position to hook his legs around Devon's arms and rub his arse on the back of Devon's head.
Well, bonus points for creativity.
That's a unique stink face right there.
Yeah.
Who came up with that spot? I just want to know who was it. Was it Rikishi? Was it Devon? Was it Michael Hayes having a laugh in the back? I just want to know who was the person that thought that was a good idea. I mean, he got over.
My guess is gonna be. My guess is gonna be. It's our guy. It's our Paul Heyman.
Mm. So Batista attempts to get involved. He's kicked away. Rikishi then nails the Banzai drop and gets the victory. It was a match. So yeah, and it had that segment in it, which I don't think I ever need to do again.
You need to go back and watch this spot. This is one of the silliest things you'll ever see in a wrestling match. I don't get it.
No, I mean, you have to see it because I don't want to go through that torture on my own, really. And me and Rob both don't just want to be the only ones to have gone back and watched that spot. We need other people to see it. We need other people to see how disgusting it is. I probably might even, as soon as this episode comes up, I might just post a gif of it into the
it needs to be made into a gif because it is peak Rikishi. You thought I Did It for The Rock was good? This is good.
So post-match, Rikishi goes for a more traditional stink face, but Batista attacks, nails a spine buster, and this time Devon does nail the headbutt on Rikishi. But yeah, again, building Batista up as he's the big deal, and Devon is just kind of there with him.
Did you see the weird half plancha Devon kind of did on?
Yeah, Batista? I saw a lot of weird stuff in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised that Rikishi didn't adopt that move and turn it into his Hulk up spot.
So backstage, Stacey Keibler's getting her makeup done, where Stephanie gets in her face, asking how she could smile when Eric Bischoff was allowed in the arena. Stacey said she had no idea that was the case. Stephanie calls her incompetent because, she's meant to be a babyface and just bad mouthing everyone. Stephanie says that if Bischoff ever gets in the arena again, Stacey will suffer the consequences. She leaves, and Stacey smirks in the chair. Oh, wonder what that means.
Yep.
At least, she didn't just stand there and just say, "You'll get your Stephanie" or something like that. At least they tried to have some level of subtlety in this one.
Really, they're in a weird era with Steph. She would go full on babyface within 2003 with stuff we won't cover, but they're in a very strange spot with Steph where they're trying to figure out who she is.
So if there wasn't enough weird stuff on this show, now Jamie Noble's out there with Nydia. Oh, this spot. So he cuts a promo in front of the North Carolina Trash, says they're no-class rednecks, and that now Nydia is a rich woman, so she doesn't have to worry about having a trailer and slumming it with these guys in the crowd anymore. And so they head out to the announce table, and they point out Cole and Taz. They say they won't mess with Taz because he's a street thug.
Funny.
Noble then says that Cole has been eyeballing Nydia in all the matches, and Noble says tonight is his lucky night. So he gets Nydia to take her shirt off, and she climbs over the announce table and mounts Michael Cole.
Yeah.
She starts unbuttoning his shirt, kissing his neck, and Noble then tells us to do the tongue trick that she likes to do, and so she just sticks her tongue down Michael Cole's throat for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, so that's...
Cole's got chest hair.
Yeah, he does, at this point. He's not quite as built up as he would be in later years. He hasn't quite found his bodybuilding regime yet. But, not like, I guess it's in character for Noble and Nydia because that's just their gimmick.
Their Trailer Park Hicks in 2002. This is a...
I just don't really know what this accomplished. Like, they didn't really have anything else that they could do on this one. I guess it's weird. It's weird.
Not the weirdest.
Not the weirdest.
Michael Cole would ever be put in on SmackDown.
No, it's not even the weirdest thing on the show. Just like still the Rikishi, but like rubbing on Devon's head. I mean, I know Rikishi is known for just rubbing his butt in people's face, but it's just a weird way of doing it.
It was a really weird way.
Noble says that as long as Cole says nice things about them, then he'll be back for more. And then they make out, and Taz uses this opportunity to say that it's the equivalent of Michael Cole kissing Jamie Noble.
Oh, nice.
I mean, realistically, he's using that as a way to tease Cole when it's Noble who's the one who kissed her second.
I know, it's Noble's making out with Cole there.
Mm. So after that bizarreness, we move on to another bizarre segment where it's backstage. Stephanie finds Billy Kidman, Hardcore Holly, and Mike Awesome of all people.
Ooh, this is a one and done for Awesome, right?
Yeah, I think this is the only appearance he'll make on SmackDown, unless he appears in like that Halloween party they have a couple of months later. But like watching Raw, and then this other random guy who Stephanie points out, and then he just leaves immediately.
Watching Raw via VHS tape, by the way.
Yeah, they're watching Raw via VHS tape. And Stephanie says that's the reason they don't get in main events, because they don't pay attention to their own product. Not because it's Billy Kidman, Hardcore Holly, and Mike Awesome.
And not because it's Mike Awesome who hasn't done anything since the Invasion? Yeah,
I didn't realise that like ball clipper Stephanie had developed so early in this in her run at this point. It's basically like we're basically throughout, I don't know, what was it? The authority angle where Stephanie would essentially just castrate every single male wrestler she ever dealt with and never got the consequences because they can't beat up women.
I think it's interesting that they put Hardcore Holly in that position to be berated by Steph. I feel like that's something he'd probably shoot down.
Mm-hmm. So she warns that she never wants to see her superstars watching Raw ever again, and we can finally move on to some action and move away from some of this bizarre stuff that's happening with the match between Rico and John Cena. So this is their former tag team partners in OVW, which then transitioned to one of the hottest feuds in OVW between Rico and John Cena.
And now it transitions into this, which is just
a nothing match on SmackDown.
Nothing.
Yeah. So Rico dominates the early stages, delivering a lot of his unique-looking kicks to Cena. He hits a chin kick, but then Cena transitions into a spine buster. The crowd is really quiet. I feel like the guys that were meant to be doing the crowd sweetening just forgot to do it for this match.
Well, the guy who was meant to do the crowd sweetening, Stephanie just kicked him out of the building.
Yeah, that'd be a good way of tying it all in. I like the story you're coming up with in this one. It probably makes more sense at this point. Rico misses a top rope moonsault. Cena goes for a shoulder tackle, which is like I think the first attempt we've seen of him doing like his more traditional shoulder tackle that he would incorporate as two of the moves in his 5 moves of doom. And Rico catches him with a drop kick while doing it, which I thought was a nice spot. Rico sits on Cena's chest, don't know why, for some reason, and then misses a roundhouse kick. But Cena avoids that, hits the protoplex, and that's the first pin that he's got using the protoplex. It's the first pin that he's really got while actually hitting a move and then pinning somebody.
Well, it's Rico, so, it's safe.
Cena decides to slap him after the match because Rico slapped him at the beginning, and he's assaulted from behind by Billy and Chuck, and they hit Cena with a modified Doomsday device, which I believe they called... It was something red. I don't think it's Code Red, but it's something like that.
I think that this match to me reminds me of when I first heard Jim Cornette talk about how Rico was like the biggest star in OVW, and for me, I'll never be able to see that because I just see Rico, and there's nothing big star about Rico.
Well, Rico at this time was already closing on 40 as well.
Amazing.
So he's actually a lot closer in age to Hulk Hogan than probably he was to John Cena at this point.
That's scary.
So before the main event, Eric Bischoff makes his way through the audience saying that he's now bought a ticket. So he pays a fan in the front row to swap seats so he can take a seat from the front row. When they come back from the break, he's convinced some of the members of the crowd to start chanting "Watch Raw."
You know, hold on. There's also a great segment where some dude just gets up behind Cole and Taz and just like flexes, and they cut away quickly. But it's just like, oh, you 2002 douchebag! Like, you're having a good time.
I don't think we're too far removed from that in 2020 either.
No, they're not.
We're in an era where fans just want to be on TV and will do anything,
and they just completely want to overtake the show.
Obviously, they can't do that nowadays because there's no fans. But one of the advantages, I guess, one of the very few advantages. So,
how did Eric just like? He's like, "Hey, buddy, I got your. I'm just gonna give you money for your ticket," and the guy just, it's all good.
Maybe he inspired a lot. Maybe he inspired a lot of other fans to do that and going forward. Like if they thought, okay, we'll just get this crappy ticket and then we'll try and buy a better ticket down the road.
Yeah, fun stuff. Even though I will agree with you at this point, it's getting a little too overbearing with the whole GM taking over everything.
So Stephanie struts down to the ring. She sarcastically applauds Bischoff for purchasing a ticket. She then says the main event isn't actually going to be Rock versus Edge, but they will instead be teaming together to take on her newly acquired Raw superstars, Eddie Guerrero and the Intercontinental Champion, Chris Benoit.
I think this was a great moment, but more importantly, this shapes SmackDown.
Yeah, two of the most pivotal members of the SmackDown 6 that we'll become very familiar with over the coming months. And yeah, so they're going to have the match going forward. This is probably the best segment out of, at least for me, out of all of these GM interactions so far, where Bischoff gets so unbelievably furious about this acquisition that he jumps the barricade and tries to grab Stephanie or grab the wrestlers. And so security drags him out of the arena and he's just shouting and screaming, saying that he'll destroy her or he will end her. And
I like that he immediately mouthed, "You bitch." When she announces them.
That was great. Bischoff is very, very
Bischoff is a great character. I think Bischoff, he's one of the few people who just really gets it. Fun little note for me, they still haven't updated the belts. Benoit's belt still says WWF.
Yeah, they have to still cover that over in the I don't know if they have to do it in the network stuff anymore because I think they managed to get some sort of agreement, which means they didn't have to. But at least for a while, whenever you would watch video recordings and stuff like that, they always had to blur it over.
Also, good on Bischoff. He put up a little bit of a fight with that security guard for a second there.
They should have got that female security guard that dealt with
yeah, really.
I wonder what she was doing at this point in time. Probably in college, or not in college, but probably in in grade school or something.
I just think great segment, good GM back and forth here. So the IC champion is on SmackDown now.
Yeah, and that was obviously the big coup about that side of things. So SmackDown has the Intercontinental title, and at this point in time, if you had a championship on your brand, it meant it was exclusive, unless it was the World Championship or the Women's Championship. And so, yeah, the Intercontinental title now belongs to SmackDown, and we'll talk more about that, how that progresses as we go forward. But so now we have Benoit and Guerrero versus Edge and The Rock.
Which for my money, very good.
Great main event. Yeah, absolutely. Cole describing Benoit as aggressive and ruthless in this match always takes on a new meaning post 2007.
Well, but also just trying to hype up the ruthless aggression.
Guerrero is at another level of intensity at this point in his career.
Yeah.
Everything he does is meant to be ridiculously vicious and hard-hitting and obviously I'm more familiar, or not say more familiar, but I have an affinity towards the Viva La Raza, Lie, Cheat, Steal, the more comedic and light-hearted Eddie Guerrero character. But at this point in time, he's Latino heat. He's super aggressive, super hungry to impress with every single performance he puts on.
Yeah, underrated era for Guerrero. I know everybody loves the lowrider and the funny Lie, Cheat, Steal stuff, but like this to me is solid Eddie Guerrero, best stuff here.
So Edge makes the hot tag and like runs wild for a while until he hits an Edge-o-matic on Eddie, but Benoit breaks it up with a drop kick to the face, which was a nice way of breaking it up because it immediately transitioned the heat back onto Edge and The Rock. So it had a second heat segment. Benoit hit 3 consecutive German suplexes with a bridge on the third one to get a 2 count. It's like one thing that we're going to notice with this. Benoit, since his return, has not hit the diving headbutt.
No.
And doesn't hit it on this match either.
There's a moment, it's we won't cover it here, but it's ECW One Night Stand 2005, actually when he's in the ring with Guerrero, where Mick Foley actually mentions after his surgery, he had said he wasn't going to do it anymore. But I guess he eventually got to a place where he felt comfortable doing it again.
Yeah, I kind of wish he didn't get comfortable.
I do too, you know?
Yeah. So a delayed brainbuster by Guerrero on Edge, which was impressive considering the size difference between the two of them. Benoit and Guerrero put Edge on top of the turnbuckle for a double team, but he fights off and he drops Guerrero onto Benoit, then nailing a sunset flip. Then there's a mid-air collision between Edge and Guerrero, and this is the opportunity for Edge to tag in The Rock. Or actually, no, before that, Benoit knocks The Rock off the apron, but then Edge hits a running sit-out powerbomb, and then makes the tag to The Rock, and the roof just goes off because they've stalled. It's really, really like fundamental great tag team wrestling. And Rock goes wild for a bit. Edge eventually hits a spear on Guerrero. He tries another one on Benoit, but he hits the ring post instead. And so it's basically down at this point to Benoit and The Rock.
Underrated feud from the year 2000.
Oh yeah, it's great as well. Spinebuster to Benoit, and then Guerrero gets in the ring, and Rock, in one fluid motion, lifts him up for the rock bottom. It was the smoothest.
That's
rock
all
bottom
Guerrero. Come on, that's all Eddie.
Oh, it is all Eddie, but it's the smoothest rock bottom I've ever seen because immediately, as soon as Eddie is anywhere near the Rock, he's already halfway in the air, ready to receive the rock bottom. It was just perfect, and he goes for the
perfect.
As he goes for the people's elbow to Benoit. Lesnar walks down the ramp with a chair. This distracts the Rock. Rock just staring him down, and Benoit uses this to immediately apply the crossface. And then there's this long, it's slightly awkward in respect, but I think it really worked at the time, of Lesnar and Rock the camera just switching between the two of them staring at each other. Rock while he's in the crossface, and Lesnar just staring from ringside, and Rock's just turning his head every now and again and just bugging his eyes out. Again, very, very Sid-like.
Yeah. And The Rock is doing his best to bug his own eyes out and talk shit. Really good segment. Again, I said it last week with Hogan and Rock, but the psychology.
Yeah, this is very good because they're building towards this big match, but they're not making Lesnar and Rock touch at all before SummerSlam. So they're really stretching out. They're making the feud feel intense and big, but they're not getting physical in any way.
And you know what's admirable? The Rock puts Benoit over.
Yeah, so Rock eventually succumbs to the crossface. He's forced to... He doesn't pass out even, he taps out to the crossface. So the Intercontinental Champion on his first night on SmackDown has beat the Undisputed Champion in the tag team match. So Lesnar applauds and smiles as soon as Benoit's won the match. He retreats up the ring, and as he's standing on stage, Hogan appears from nowhere with a steel chair and strikes Lesnar repeatedly in the back with a steel chair.
How many young guys do you think have metaphorically felt this moment where they're at the top of their game and then Hogan from behind?
Yeah, it was a good segment. The crowd popped. It sent the crowd home happy after The Rock was forced to tap out, and it gives Hogan a little bit of heat because for the previous 2 weeks he'd just been destroyed by Lesnar. So this gives him a little bit of heat and a little bit of an edge over Lesnar before their match next week. So I think this was better than last week's show. I thought the main event really kind of put it over the edge for me.
I love the main event. And I thought a lot of the segments were good. Bischoff gets an A+ from me for his involvement tonight. Noble and Nydia, as bizarre as it was a good time. I enjoyed Hogan and Angle.
Yeah, that was a good match.
I enjoyed how much, like, Hogan gets a lot of play on this episode. Angle, Brock. They really maximize their minutes. But I think we can all agree the takeaway from this show is Rikishi.
Yeah, well, it's the thing that will probably be haunting my nightmares for considerably longer than anything else in this show stands in the memory. But yeah, everything. But the main event was great. The opener was a great match as well. You have the even though the Lesnar and Henry thing was more of an angle than an actual like full complete match, it was still great to see Lesnar lift up a guy of that size and deliver the move. The only things that I feel were negative were obviously the Rikishi beyond that segment. The actual match itself was just a whole load of nothing. The Cena Rico match was a whole load of nothing, and besides that Bischoff segment towards the end where he's just going off with like a load of character work and screaming at Stephanie, again, the presence of the GM is still too overbearing for me.
I agree. I can agree with that by this point.
But yeah, I think that this was a good, another thumbs up edition of SmackDown. And yeah, any other closing thoughts before we move on to some plugs?
For my money, next week is some good stuff.
Well, yeah, that's the good point. We have to talk a little bit about build the hype up at least for next week. So, in case you were thinking of dropping off, you definitely don't want to drop off for next week because it's a big show. So the main event is Brock Lesnar versus Hulk Hogan, and definitely won't miss that one.
What's the opener, Cal?
Yeah, the opener is Kurt Angle versus John Cena.
Ah, we're back there again.
And this would later transition into a 6-man tag between Edge, John Cena, and Rey Mysterio against Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, and Eddie Guerrero.
Say those 6 names at any point in time, and somebody thinks you're talking about a main event match.
We also have Reverend Devon again against Mark Henry. So 2 losers against each other. Someone's got to actually win this match.
I appreciate the fact that everybody's getting a chance here. I get you gotta find some silver lining.
And we also have Rikishi versus Batista. So,
interesting. Is this Batista's first singles match on this journey?
I believe so, unless somebody obviously will put out something on the previous editions that we probably just glossed over. But I think this is his first singles match. And yeah, there's a lot of other stuff to look forward to just outside of the matches. And funnily enough, this is the first ever episode of SmackDown that I watched.
Really?
So I'm...
Oh, we're going to get into whatever memories you can find of that.
Yeah, so my nostalgia levels are on high for this one. So hopefully you guys will be looking forward to that one as well, and hopefully you've enjoyed this edition. But we'll just throw a few plugs your way before we depart. So as always, make sure you've liked the video, click the notification bell. If you're not subscribed to Smark Out Moment on YouTube, make sure you do, or on any other of the podcast feeds that you may listen to this to. Make sure you're following Smark Out Moment on Facebook, Twitter, every other place that you can find us at Smark Out Moment. And join the Mega Maniacs if you want to continue conversations with like-minded wrestling fans over on the Facebook group we have there. There's also ways you can support us monetarily. Obviously, any amount of money is very helpful and useful in like keeping the lights on and making sure we're motivated to deliver the same quality of work every single week in, week out. And so if you want to join up with the Darkcast here and follow along with the 2002 pay-per-view reviews we're doing alongside this podcast, then that's the $10 tier. Or if you want us to watch something completely separate, I can't even think of anything off the top of my head. But
listen, if you want us to watch, Raw 2002, you can do that with continued donations to the Pick Your Poison tier. And we can just watch all of Raw.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's obviously the Redbubble and TeePublic stores as well, where you can pick up some Smark Out Moment merchandise, as well as stuff for Fanboys Anonymous, our sister site, the Blue brand. over on the Smark Out Moment family, where you talk about geek culture and movies and comic books and everything in that sphere that Tony runs so diligently. And yeah, just check out all the stuff that you can support them on Patreon and through their merchandise shops as well. And I think that's rounds it off for me until my personal ones. But have you got anything else you want to add, Rob?
I would just say, echoing what Callum says, keep supporting everything we're doing here. Tony does work very hard to keep the ship running, and I'm glad that we can contribute a little bit of our own flavor to this. Check me out on Twitter and Instagram at DeFelice, but check out what I'm doing on the work front for Fightful.com and WrestleZone.com, respectively.
Yeah, make sure you're following all the articles on Smark Out Moment as well, and you can follow me on Twitter at Wigmeister14, and that will do us in for the latest edition of the Paul Heyman SmackDown podcast. We hope you join us for episode 7, and we hope you enjoyed this one. But for now, this has been another Smark Out Moment, and we are being counted out.